Welcome everybody to this panel. It's panel 2 on the art of communication about health. I'm Anna and I'm going to be the moderator for this panel. So I want to welcome all of our presenters, Pooja, Aayushi, Sayantani, and Pratiti, and Ayush. So first up is going to be Pooja Murada from the Sehgal Foundation in India. And she is going to be speaking on positive deviance application and development communications for behavior change during and post-COVID-19 waves for rural audiences. So please go ahead, Pooja.
Thank you, Anna. Hello, everyone. Good morning, good evening. Do I have the screen sharing option on?
Yes, you do. So go ahead and share your screen.
Is it visible to everyone?
Yes, we can see it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Anna. Thanks for this opportunity. I'm glad that, what I had written during the experience I had in the COVID finally is ready to share at a platform. So thank you for the opportunity. In India, the second wave of COVID-19 caused chaos in urban centers, and there was hue and cry all over the national capital for hospital beds and oxygen equipment. The pressure on India's health system was far too high to meet the acute need for life-saving oxygen and medicines. That deadly wave put forth the grim reality on the entire health system. The lockdown, with the intent to unburden the system, led to further damage to the already crippled economy, livelihood, and infrastructure. And coming to the rural India, where we work, and where 66% of the population lives with the little or no internet connection access, and a lack of resources has been engulfed in the crisis as more and more cases emerge in these areas. With low testing rates and trust deficits in local health systems, the challenge at hand is even bigger. So in a scenario that is new for everyone, whether a healthcare system, government, or the public at large, and where situations are volatile and keep changing by the week, the role of communications cannot be limited to providing information and updates. It requires a much wider approach. So the information sharing during the pandemic, we thought, must empower people to make the right decisions to prevent themselves from becoming affected. And the responsibility was bigger and more challenging to reach out to rural areas that have such low penetration of media. So with that background, I'll take you to, how we actually addressed the situation that was emerging, especially in the low connectivity or the media dark areas. And to address the situation, a positive deviant inquiry, we thought, is a thoughtful and effective strategy by the communicators to inform and change the direction of the mood, expression, and action within the communities. Before delving into the positive deviance inquiry application at the grassroots, let's first shed some light on national information sharing scenario during the pandemic between April 2020 and July 2021. The pandemic put two main challenges in front of the development communicators. On one hand, the biggest challenge was to spread the most timely information to the people to prevent the spread of the deadly virus, while the other challenge was to mitigate and counter the false information and myths attached to COVID-19 testing and vaccination with factual messages. So how do we define positive deviance? So PD or positive deviance refers to a behavioral and social change approach premised on the observation that in any context, certain individuals confronting similar challenges, constraints, and resource deprivation to their peers will nonetheless employ uncommon but successful behaviors or strategies that enable them to find better solutions. So in PD, positive deviance, we looked through 4 critical stages. The first one was to define the problem and look at the desired outcomes. And when I say problem, the challenges and the tough target that development communication experts had were multifold, from prevention to getting tested, to home cures, hospitalization, vaccination, psychological uplifts. So how does one deal with the entire scenario of fear, pandemic, lockdown, loss of work, loss of shelter, sudden overflow of patients in hospitals, closed education institutions, much more that were coming every day in the news through the WhatsApp flow of information that was just flogging the mind of the people. The second critical stage is to look for positive deviance or the individuals and groups who can contribute to the outcome. That was critical for us to look into our inquiry, and then conduct the inquiry to determine the unique PD aspects. So look at those individuals, look at those groups of people who could stand out and become the role model for people to actually emulate. And through that, the third critical stage is to design activities so the practice are replicated and adopted by other community members. I hope I'm audible, Anna.
Pooja, you are audible. You could turn up your volume a little if you still have some possibility of doing that.
Okay. So I'll take you through the place where we conducted this inquiry, where we started the entire PD process. The development communication experts from our NGO, which is the SM Sehgal Foundation, we took the district Nu as the first target geography. And the PD was applied and tested at a community level by identifying positive examples from within the community, by bringing in potential explanators who could positively change opinions, identifying and highlighting the factors that underpin the performance of positive deviance. So Nu is essentially, part of a transformation of aspirational district, which is considered one of very low in the socio and economic indices. So, and that is defined through different parameters, which is health, nutrition, education, besides the mainstream of people, which is agriculture, the availability of water resources, the basic infrastructure. So that defines where a geography lies. So Nu, our target area, is one of the aspirational districts in India. And to take you through some of the indices at a glance, it is, as I said, is one of the most so-called backward districts, even though it is very close to the national capital region, which is Gurugram. The area is largely inhabited by an ethnic type called Neo-Muslims, which are characterized by some of India's lowest socioeconomic development indices. As you can see in the data, out of 447 villages, only half of the population is under the literacy level, and female are further low in the literacy levels. It is largely a patriarchal and conservative community where girls get married before uh, permissible age of 18 years. Uh, Even in this century, most of the deliveries, childbirths take place at home, and there is people still go for open defecation. Now, looking at development communications framework that we devised to work on our communication messages, uh, it included the 4 key pointers, as we do in most of our communications, which is content, method, people, and partners. So in a pandemic, content specific to the situation we all share become critical, and ensuring timely and accurate communication is key to effective community response during each pandemic stage. The process includes various platforms such as digital news, media, WhatsApp, videos, press relations, community radio, blog, call centers, webinars, conference calls, which help replicate the positive effect of highlighted through the Deviance. Fear, distrust, and resistance are common reactions during pandemic and are more so in remote areas where a lot of myth and misinformations are rampant. So looking at in the content, which we consider as a king, as the old marketing adage goes, this applies equally to brand and social marketing. The social marketing based on development communication during COVID meant disseminating important COVID information to the communities. We had to ensure that content we provided came from credible and accurate sources. Then in the method development communications under DC approach, we used media mix to get the information across. For example, the same communication message on COVID-19 awareness cannot do justice to two distinct sets of audiences in the community. So for youth and students, clear and crisp communication messages had worked, while for elderly, relating that the same message to a story or giving it to a historical perspective had worked. Similarly, stay-at-home advice may not be possible for a person working on a daily basis in a rural, poor settings. So that was addressed in differently. In people, the target groups included people across all ages and socio-economic backgrounds in the community. And major groups divided by demographic include the old and young. And socioeconomic sectors as women, children, farmers, shopkeepers, frontline workers, farm labor, truck drivers, which is, contributes to a large number of people in that area. So those were essentially our target audiences. And the role of partners in designing a development communication campaign on COVID-19 was immensely important, starting from the district administration, so including the government, the health department, the community, the village, collectives, and the village development institutions, the panchayats, the governing bodies in the villages, even the CSR support, the corporate support with funds to undertake COVID-19 relief work in villages. So all that came together to address the situation. And you see with community in the diagram on the right, in the nucleus, we had that community, our target audience, and with their participations, with the collaborations of different stakeholders, by including each one of them and building trust, which was very, very important at that time, to build the rapport so they could trust our messaging and they could adapt and adopt to what was coming through our sources was important for us. And sorry. So what we actually did was a different media mix approach. The district that where we did this, where we started working on this PD approach has our community radio, which is called Alfaze Mewat. So on Alfaze Mewat, a different kind of messaging went. And Alfaze Mewat holds a lot of value in the area because that's the only local medium that is available for people to get the information in their own language by their own people. So this is a community-led radio station, which is broadcasting to 225,000 people in the area. So the messaging on-air engagement through community radio focused on preparedness and prevention, and over 250 programs were made with the people, with those PDs that were identified in the process. And during that span of first wave and second wave, a lot of people called to connect with us, to understand. And as I mentioned in the previous slide, there are a lot of people who are truck drivers in the areas. So when the lockdown was announced, there were truck drivers who were stuck in wherever they were in the country. So they would call the radio station to find out what is the situation in their village, because through WhatsApp, all kinds of messages were reaching out to them. But to confirm the credibility of that information, they would call the radio and they would check and leave message for their people. Then a lot of off-air engagements we did. So in the shadow areas where the radio cannot be reached, our people would do the narrowcasting, and with small group of farmers, of women, to tell them about prevention, and when the vaccination came in, to encourage them to go for it. So through group meetings and narrowcasting, the information was shared. A lot of posters and wall paintings were designed, were put in, we call it the chopal, the place where people usually get together or people cross the area. So on the strategic locations, the information related to hand washing, relating to social distancing, that kind of information was shared in, in a way which are more animated, pictorial, so people who cannot read can also understand what we are trying to inform them. And of course, for youth engagement, we took to social media. We made small videos, small clips that was shared with the group of people who were there on the WhatsApp. So, so it was a wide spectrum through which the information got shared. And a lot of interesting models also came up during that time. So when people were calling the radio station, instead of the tring tring, they would hear the sound cough cough. So, and then the message around social distancing and to prevent themselves. And we launched a complete campaign on Mission Corona with the support of UNICEF, which gave a lot of interesting ideas and creative messaging to inform people about safeguarding themselves from the virus. So some of the creative content that we did in both the first and the second wave included a lot of interesting series on radio. So in the first lockdown we did, it was for 21 days were announced of closure. So 21 din 21 baatein, which means 21 days and 21 new topics. That kind of series was launched, wherein an expert was called every single day who would inform or talk to people about something. And then we'll open the phone lines for people to interact back with them. So to make it a two-way communication for community who's indoors, and to encourage them to be, to stay indoor, we ensured that all 21 days they get to know about 21 new things and interact with 21 different people.
whom we will also engage on the phone through the IVRS system. Then we also launched a series called Vaccine Hero. So in the area, people were very skeptical of going for vaccination. It was tough. And, every day authorities would come with the bag full of their vaccination, and they would go back. People would not go for vaccination. So in that case, the PD approach was to look for those people who have got the vaccine, to record them on the day of vaccination and a week later of vaccination, to give them to share their experience that they are fine and nothing has happened to them, and if there are side effects, how mild the side effects were, to for people to adopt a vaccination process. So such kind of interesting and creative ways were made available on the radio for people to adopt vaccination and the safety guidelines. So how we actually, how the entire approach followed in the PD. We looked at the topic and themes, and we also looked at the audiences, the target audience. And then the topic and themes, as you can see, we identified the awareness building, promoting appropriate behavior for people to abide during COVID. And on the target audience side, our primary target audience were rural community, and then were also the stakeholders, which included the government, corporate and NGOs, and also the local media partners. And the entire process had a, it was an inclusive process. So wherever the PD is found, we would bring it on at the platform for people to know that this is the person from the government and this is what he brings for you. This is the person from the farming community and this is what his experience has been. And the 3-dimension of development communication strategy that was inbuilt in our plan was how to inform people, the content generation through banners, wall paintings, a lot of IEC material, digital and traditional media was included in the process, and to identify positive deviant, the right examples for people who face similar challenges, but using the information shared, they went on to be the change for others. And also how to inspire others. So to highlight those role models, those positive deviants, and share their stories so the others could be inspired. And and all these were community-based programming. The formats were mostly research-based, feature interviews, entertainment, live discussions, and participatory content development. So to conclude, in our whatever efforts that were taken under the PD approach, in the end, it enhanced dialogue among the community. A lot of participation came from the people who were mostly had been silent. We could open a two-way communication channels by bringing the experts at the station, by bringing the authorities, government authorities, the chief medical officers in the radio station so they could interact with people, to create an innovative content for them to like it and to make it more trendy for people to adopt it, and to propose solutions that are local by identifying positive deviants. We could foster collaboration with stakeholders, promote a lot of local voices, sustainability by engaging community in design and implementation of the initiatives, which could drive social and behavior change, and to bring out positive local role models to emulate by other members. So with the collective efforts of, what we did in the communication arena, and with others, what authorities were doing, at one point knew that was, the hot spot or hot belt for COVID, became a zero active case district. So which was, I would say, we would say that in both the waves, the same approach could be done. And we had seen that with time, people understood, and we could support many to get prevented from the virus. This is a small video that I'd like to take.
Pooja, we are almost out of time. So
So this is 1 minute video,
okay, you
just to give a glimpse of the area, just to give a glimpse how, how the place actually looks like.
okay, once you
Is that
play it,
okay?
you'll have 1 minute to conclude. Thank
Okay.
you.
Let me know.
लब पे आती है एक आवाज, सुन के अल्फाजे में बात, खुशनुमा हुआ आगाज, सुनकर ये अंदाज, सुनो भाई सुनो अल्फाजे में बात, FM 107.8।
स्वागत है आप सभी का अल्फाजे में बात 107.8 FM पर। और हर दिन की तरह आज की शुरुआत करते हैं कोरोना बचाओ गान से।
जगावेंगे भारत से कोरोना भगावेंगे, घर घर में अलग जगावेंगे, घर घर में अलग जगावेंगे। घर घर में अलग जगावेंगे, घर घर में अलग जगावेंगे, भारत से कोरोना भगावेंगे, घर घर में अलग जगावेंगे, भारत से कोरोना भगावेंगे, घर घर में अलग जगावेंगे, भारत से कोरोना भगावेंगे।
So, to conclude, I would say that the entire experience had been successful because we could engage with local talent, we could engage with local people, and without the support of the community, those PDs that we could identify, and of course the authority, the going down graph that we had seen in the cases wouldn't have been possible. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pooja, for that very interesting presentation. I love hearing about community radios and what they're doing. So thank you very, very much. Our next presentation, just so you know, we are going straight from presentation to presentation, and we will, so everyone please hold your questions to the end, and if you think you might forget them, please do type them into the chat, and then we can return to them once all of the presentations are finished. So our next presentation is going to be given by Aayushi Chatterjee, Pratiti Saha, and Sayantani Chaktraborty from Christ University in Bangalore, India. And their paper is entitled COVID-19 and the Art of Communication: Public Spaces as Sites of Power Discourses and Heteronormative Exclusionary Politics in Indian Murals. So thank you very much, and we would love to hear you.
Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Sayantani, there's the slideshow button on the right corner. Yeah. First slide. Okay, so our work revolves around Indian murals and the art of COVID pandemic health awareness through the art form. We have heavily borrowed from Habermas's ideas on public life worlds and Anne's perspectives on power and communication to reconstruct the mechanisms of exclusionary solidarity that is conveyed through art, questions specific to the hegemonic discourse within the art practice, and the alliance between the artists and the state policies are of specific interest to us. We intend to analyze and reveal the underlying meanings implicit in the mural cycles to claim normative agency over the public space and consequently explore the strategies employed by the marginalized initiatives. The undertaking uncovers the social construction of the public and realizes how LGBTQIA plus art enterprises like the Ravani Art Project and the Fearless Collective initiative attempt to claim the resistance against the authorized opinions marked under the health communication templates. Shandini, next slide. Next slide.
I'm sorry, I'm actually, something seems to be stuck. I'm trying, sorry.
Okay. Eliminated from popular media attention, such ventures find themselves at the mercy of a feedback and control system intrinsic to the online realm that has excluded marginalized communities from the fiction of free will and the construction of global attention. The murals from the queer community then create a unique discourse of assemblage and dialogue, which reveals the contestation within the spatial dynamics of geographies online and offline. By using Greta Gard's ideas and by comparing art created by LGBTQIA plus community with others, the probe deconstructs existing notions of the public and the non-public, heteronormative special zones, and the resisting minority locales. Our research questions happen to be: who constitutes the Janta invoked by political leaders in dictating health measures? How does the politics of exclusionary solidarity consequently function in mainstream murals to legitimize this Janata, coded in a way to create boundaries which peripheralized intersectional subjectivities of class and gender? How does media representation on digital platforms dictate the receptions of art produced in the public realm, possibly manifesting into an agent of manipulation that solidifies privileged private interest at the cost of personal, political, sexual identities? Our thesis statement is that heteronormative superiority in communication through art during the pandemic has resulted in a grammar of solidarity through selective popularization of online media representation that furthers existing concerns of elimination and marginalization of the community from the boundaries of the majoritarian public's life world. I'll try to throw some light on our theoretical framework and its use within the context. I'll also speak of the state and its responses before we get into the hands-on analysis of artworks. Deriving from Arendt, exercise of power is conditioned by persuasion and discourse, two niches that remain primarily influencing public opinion in accordance with the dominant ideals, with intentions to engage with a mimetic reiteration of ideas to enroll and maintain the solidity of the manufactured opinions and structures. The public space is enriched with discourses that majorly influence the bios politicos. The bios politicus of a person involves action, a means to make politics through the use of freedom implicit in the public space. This action at times spearheads a sense of commonality that has the potential to accelerate a power politics, one that is driven by active production of discourses with an agenda of persuading others of an accepted narrative of sexuality. Artists make politics sometimes in accordance with the social scenes and sometimes in revolt, and the ideological undertones that are conveyed enrich the public space in a contesting manner. As Habermas suggests, this public sphere is made up of private people gathered together as a public and articulating the needs of the society with the state. The global crisis of the pandemic invoked this articulation in a manner that the space became a medium to convey the safety measures that were implicated across the country in a bid to fight the virus, giving the mural artist a contemporary theme of awareness and information dissemination. Why the health-specific advocation of masks and sanitization filled the streets of India in assistance of government-recognized safety measures, a constructed politics of heteronormative excess that dictated the constituent of the Janata through mural representation affirming the non-inclusive affairs of the state calls for attention. Eliminated from the discourse of health initiatives altogether, and subsequently from the visual task of producing murals that do not do away with the involvement of queer identities, queer-led initiatives attempt to reclaim the inclusion through sporadic mural cycles that attempt to reconstitute the private public. With an interest to situate a perspective that sees the popular mural artworks that claim to convey COVID-specific health dogmas not as innocent texts, but politically led agents, the paper will uncover how the heteronormative janta is depicted more often than not as a natural Indian janta with the use of stereotypical imagings. The pandemic-induced shift in the everyday lives in the country has allowed for a look into the already constructed cis-normative structure even when it comes to healthcare and awareness, especially during the global health emergency. The political abstractions of heteronormative zones were made visible through the institutional spaces of quarantine centers that became the epitome of exclusionary spaces due to the practice of discrimination and backlash extended to a non-normative genders. Swarupa Dev, a human rights lawyer and a trans rights activist, observes that this long-standing discrimination also plays out in the fact that the fear of being stigmatized and ridiculed by the healthcare professional discourages them from using healthcare services, which is now leaving them at an increased risk of not being tested or treated for COVID-19. Such abstractions seem to be embedded and coded in the ways the citizenry is viewed on an institutional level. Habermas's notions of a public sphere as a connecting link between the state and the people, in conjunction with the contemporary social praxis, ends up designating who is the people or public and who isn't. Such exclusions in the state-led action can also be witnessed in subtle choices of addressing the public. For instance, the supposed inclusive term Janata being followed up with exclusive mentions of Bhaiyo or Behno and Deshwasiyo in the same breath, meaning brothers and sisters and nations people in the Prime Minister's famed radio show Man Ki Baat. While structures of exclusions were already in existence before the pandemic, the contemporary situation has only exacerbated existing vulnerabilities into what Samira Nantakini and Swarnim call the disposability of the queer cells. To further acknowledge the graveness of the stigma and the elimination, the lack of queer representation in health awareness campaigns ensued on the queer population, more importantly, the transgender public incidents specific to the South Asian experience of the emergency are important to keep in hindsight. In Hyderabad, the housing society found it acceptable to paste a poster that conveyed that having sex or speaking with the Hijra community of the area would cause COVID illness. In tune with Greta Thunberg's understanding of empathy as a seat of change and new information, the serious dearth of LGBTQ representation in the body of governments has led to a consequent exclusion of the queer community throughout the process of vaccination, including the medical trials. And as has been reported in Lucknow, transgender communities received no assistance or ration schemes from the government, as the regular work was majorly hindered because of the lockdown measures. Additional lack of photo IDs amongst the transgender public that happens to already be exacerbated by issues of access and gender conformity enforced by the state, which were made mandatory for even accessing healthcare facilities, only point towards how the pandemic allowed the abstract idea of the janta to only constitute people who conform to the male-female binary. How murals then majoritatively aligned with this conformity to maintain the instituted idea of the public and the non-public is particularly important, as while art has often been seen as an important medium of revolt, its conformity in reiterating socially constructed life worlds has rarely been interrogated. With that, I'll ask Sayantani to speak about the heteronormative excess in murals during the pandemic.
Thank you, Ayushi. So one very important aspect of exclusionary politics embedded during the time of pandemic resulted from the challenges faced in the online community by marginalized sectors. Digital media-based awareness campaigns, pandemic-inspired sketches, and other initiatives showed an overwhelming amount of heteronormative expressions of awareness, heteronormative expressions of extending awareness and information. Anwar Chitrokar from Bengal produced a series of art known as Tales of the Times, using the folk style of photochitro that focused on various nuances of the after effects that the pandemic left us with. Each and every sketch deals with domestic characters of everyday life that conveniently only includes cis-normative binaries of gender. Specifically, his Bhalobasha Chotto Jaiga or Tiny Space for Love depicts a cishet couple using their car as a substitute for public spaces designated for romance. Similar heterosexual couples and normative outlays of family inform the subject matter of the rest of the series, which results in a de facto invisibility of the queer community. that essentially leads to an exclusion of any non-normative identities from conversations relating to safety and mental health, as well as access to any other form of assistance. Binay Cheguri, a street artist, promotes his murals to raise awareness by bringing to attention the different sectors of the populace that would benefit from such information. He says, and I quote, old, young, police, woman, etc. These demarcations end up prioritizing specific discourses and assigning more prominence to them. Magalhaes, Sequeira, and Bernardo use the term discursive impermeability in this context, where such divisions lead the media to contribute to formations and limitations of public sphere boundaries. In short, using their scope of implicit freedom, artists like Anwar Chitrakar and Binay Cheguri take action or make politics, as Aaron calls it, to endorse a hegemonical discourse of a public space that does not extend to genders beyond the binary. Murals created also follow a specific outline of particular tropes that would appeal to an assumed gender binary public. For instance, a mural depicting Jack and Rose wearing masks and following mandates of social distancing. Artworks used to applaud frontline workers also fall into the niche of following specific outlines. One of the most outstanding of such tropes is the use of female sketches as mothers and goddesses who would cradle and protect the Janta from the virus. A very patriarchal notion of women as mother figures and majoritatively men as providers of essential services ranging from doctors and policemen to postal and other delivery persons invade an outstanding number of mainstream murals in India. The excessive use of male figures can also be spotted in murals relaying general hygienic dictates and preventive and solutionary measures that imply a subtext of hierarchy within the heteronormative structure. Such expressions of art are testament to already manufactured and solidified ideas of what Arendt calls good citizen and excludes anyone who, in her words, make an exception for themselves in an already demarcated public space. The discourses thus produced promote the visibility of such gender and sexual identities that are woven into the social nexus of commonality, driven by a heteronormative narrative in the public sphere. Another discourse that seemed to be relaying throughout the context of these murals seems to be an intersectional marginalization that is evident not only from the serious shortage and or lack of marginalized identities in the street art form, but also in the acute absence of professions like ragpicking and other sanitary professions in mainstream awareness campaigns, thereby inviting cross connections between gender and class into the spectrum of what is considered applaud-worthy brave frontline jobs. The outcome of such observations can be understood as an epitome of a breach in the Habermasonian notion that ironically posits the public sphere as a contestation of privileges that pushes people to take a stand, but also constructs the idea of a status quo by establishing hierarchies and depriving minorities of their agencies. However, these erasures and absences from the overarching canvas of the pandemic art form have undoubtedly invited acts of resistance from the LGBTQ community itself. I will now invite Pratiti to elucidate on such resistant initiatives that negotiate for queer spaces.
Hi, am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Okay. So the Aravani Art Project is an initiative started by Purnima Sukumar in January 2016 as a space for the transgender community to express themselves through street art. The idea behind this project came about while Sukumar was working on a documentary on the transgender community for 3 years with the London-based filmmaker Tabitha Bleek. For Sukumar, earning the trust of her collaborators was the hardest part. We need to understand that it is difficult for most trans people to come out on the street and paint, she explained. This is not the comfort zone. It's taken time to build that trust, and it's finally easy for me to call them and say, let's paint this wall together. In just 6 years, the Aravani project has become a successful movement that aims to create and reclaim public spaces for members of the transgender community. They do so by using creative and colorful medium of visual arts and social participation. During the COVID-19 pandemic, this project took on the responsibility of raising funds for the transgender community artists through art sales and online auctions, where over 200 members participated. One such initiative was called Strokes of Hope, headed by Hima Bindu. While giving an interview to Times of India, Bindu said members of the transgender community require everyone's help, and through this initiative, we can help them. She said that the digital platform will soon host work by more artists who are unable to sell their work due to pandemic, and the proceeds will then go to the transgender and other artist communities. As Habermas theorizes that any creation of public sphere is only possible with an economic growth benefiting the community, this initiative gradually paved way for trans women and other cisgender women from marginalized backgrounds to survive during the pandemic, creating their own space. Not only this, but Aravani also has been collaborating with various institutions like the Museum of Art and Photography, or MAP, who intended on reaching out to the public in the time of COVID as their business came to a standstill. Once COVID-19 happened, things came to a standstill, but we decided that this artwork was a good way to tell Bangalore that we are here. I also think that the two important pillars of MAP are inclusion and accessibility that this project conveys, and this project conveys that message, said Kamini Sawhney, the director of the museum. While the visibility of transgender people is increasing in popular culture and daily life, they still face severe discrimination, stigma, and systematic inequality. With a mission of attempting to reduce this in society, the project brings about change in the way that society views transgender and queer communities. The team advocates the idea of reclaiming spaces in society by creating different art projects to raise awareness and to create a voice for the community. When asked what changes this initiative has put across the transgender community, they were happy to say that they were successful in reclaiming and reserving their space during the pandemic, using art as a tool for change in societal perspective. What is important to note here is that the project focused on uplifting not only trans women, but other cisgendered women from marginalized backgrounds as well, aiming to give them a voice during the pandemic. However, while the more popular and visible art ends up focusing on mostly upper class essential workers, the LGBTQ murals don't do away with marginalized class and caste identities and professions while visualizing awareness. Another such initiative taken during the pandemic for the upliftment of marginalized communities through art communication was done by the Fearless Collective Project. Their main idea was to spread awareness during the whole essential and non-essential workers classification done by the government during the lockdown to ensure who deserved to work and who did not. In order to fulfill their target, women from the waste management sector in Bangalore laid kollam patterns on earth with rice and lime early in the morning after cleaning the ground at the threshold of their entrance to their home. Kollam patterns are indicators of regeneration and daily life sustaining. This indicated a symbol to celebrate the work they do every day to regenerate the city urban alchemists, tend to our streets, giving new life to things most people consider wasted. And yet, they are rarely treated with dignity, nor recognized for the absolute essential work they do. Creating murals of women ragpickers on the walls of metropolitan cities like Bangalore and Delhi, this campaign created awareness around the public sphere's exclusion faced by the oppressed community. To conclude, it can be said that the online visibility of street art by LGBTQIA communities is negligible in terms of health awareness and popularity in voices during the pandemic. This was partly because of the effect of the heteronormative superiority in art resulting in exclusionary politics that has created obvious political segregation of minority groups. Even though art projects like Aravani and the Fearless Art Collective have challenged stigmatization and marginalization during the pandemic through voices in art in order to prosper economically, there exists an apparent contestation between commercially produced mural art in the streets of India attempting to further discourses of heteronormativity and art produced by marginalized communities to claim public spaces. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, all of you. That was wonderful. It was so nice to see all of the art produced by the transgender communities and just how vibrant it is. And I hope that it gets to be more visible in online spaces and around the world, because I think it really deserves that exposure. Moving right along to our final paper of this particular panel. This paper is going to be given by Ayush Joshi from Save the Children Nepal. And it is entitled Using Traditional Folk Music Dohori to Strengthen Vaccine Uptake and Combat Rumors Related to COVID-19 in Nepal. So go right ahead, Ayush.
Okay, great. So hi everyone, I'm Ayush Joshi, the social and behavioral change lead here at Save the Children in Nepal, and I'm very thrilled to be talking about one of our unique radio programs, especially guided by social behavioral change, that is Dohori, a radio show that utilizes Dohori, a popular folk music, to herald community conversations related to COVID-19 and vaccines. But before I start, I would like to acknowledge our radio partner, our production partner, Nepal FM Network, and especially Govinda Khatka, and my colleague Amish Paudel, who has been instrumental in devising the concept of this very unique radio show. I would like to start with a brief context. Nepal, as most of the countries around the world, was badly affected by COVID-19. And as most of you would agree, that we were battling with two pandemics. One is COVID-19 virus, and other being infodemic or rumors related to COVID-19. Rumors are more deadlier as it is engineered in such a way that it creates fear inside people, but then it also restricts people from getting the right kind of health services. In this case, restricting people from getting vaccinated. As the COVID-19 vaccine slowly started trickling in the country, the magnitude in which the rumors related to the vaccine circulated did contest with the speed in which people were getting infected by the virus as well. This was a huge problem as the Nepal government had recently launched the COVID-19 vaccination campaign, but the vaccine hesitancy in people challenged the vaccination campaign as rumors such as vaccine causes immediate death, vaccines turns breast milk into poison, it decreases sexual drive and makes people impotent, and rumors engineered to make people believe that the available vaccines in Nepal were not of good quality, spread like wildfire. And something had to be done about it. Now, at Save the Children, we did a quick media landscape review, and this quick review of the vaccination-related media campaigns proved that most of the messages that we had sounded like template, with no or little acknowledgement to context or social norms related to COVID-19 and vaccines. In BS of the COVID-19 surge, a lot of organizations were not field testing the messages. Therefore, the message sounded very expert driven, which did not resonate with the communities and their aspiration. And the dictated do this and do that kind of messages was creating trust deficit and also, resulting to behavioral relapse, mostly building community resistance towards the messaging in hand. As Save the Children, we saw this as an opportunity for the need of strategic social and behavioral change informed and community focused and participatory media programming, especially to address not only the risk of COVID-19, but also to strengthen the trust of communities towards the ongoing vaccination campaign. By doing so, we were also addressing trust deficit between the people and service provider and building confidence towards existing health services, that too through open and non-adversarial conversation. So we decided to do this by using culture to shift negative norms to positive ones and build greater acceptance in the community towards COVID-19 protocols and encouraging, of course, people to get vaccinated. This is how we came up with this idea of using Dohori, especially promoting Nepal's most popular folk music, which means back and forth exchange of lyrical phrases between singers to promote critical life-saving messages on COVID-19 and vaccines. We decided to pilot the radio show Khelo Dohori in Karnali province, which has a large migrant population. People have limited access to information. There's a lot of hard to reach community as well, and where decision making, especially in terms of women and marginalized community, can be debated. So if you look at the graph that I've presented over here in the presentation, we designed the program in collaboration with the Ministry of Health and Population. The messages that we were using on COVID-19 and vaccination were signed off from National Health Communications Information Communication Center, NHEICC, and technical experts at Save the Children, and of course in the government level, the provincial government of Karnali, local FM stations and artists, and most importantly, all of these messages that we had devised were field tested. So this also contributed in developing a very robust community feedback mechanism, especially involving communities from the most marginalized population in program production, course correction, utilizing a very community generated content approach, generating community feedback, especially using multiple entry points like phone calls, social media, community listening sessions, etc. Now, if you look at the SPC program illustration of Khelo Dohori on the screen, you will see that we have involved the communities that we have worked with and for from the very beginning of the radio production cycle. At Save the Children, what we usually say is we do not treat our communities as information vessels, but as equal partners through a very collaborative leadership approach. As involvement of the community in SPC programming has definitely helped strengthen community ownership and build trust towards desired behavior change. And for us, that means to get the most marginalized population vaccinated without fear. I believe all of you must be interested to listen to Khelo Dohori and learn for yourself how the listeners participate in the radio program and how they engage with the host and the experts on the show. So here's a short demo. And for the ease of translation, we've also included subtitles for you. The demo is 2 minutes long, so please do give it a listen.
आफ्नै सुरमा दायाँ बायाँ कसैलाई नहेरी यस्तो बेला लखर लखर काहीँ डेको फेरि मनाउला मनाउला खोप लगाउन सबैलाई भनाउला मनाउला खोप लगाउन सबैलाई भनाउला मनाउला खोप लगाउन सबैलाई भनाउला
मलाई माया गर्दिनौ कि बानी कराउनी हो मलाई माया गर्दिनौ कि बानी कराउनी हो खोप लगाएर आएपछि नि किन डराउनी हो मनाउला मनाउला खोप लगाउन सबैलाई भनाउला मनाउला खोप लगाउन सबैलाई भनाउला मनाउला खोप लगाउन सबैलाई भनाउला
खुब बुझे भन्थ्यौ त राम्रोसँग तिमीले कुरो बुझेको नै रहन्छ राम्रोसँग तिमीले कुरो बुझेको नै रहन्छ हामीले मात्रै खोप लाएर सुरक्षित का भइन्छ मनाउला मनाउला खोप लगाउन सबैलाई भनाउला मनाउला खोप लगाउन सबैलाई भनाउला मनाउला खोप लगाउन सबैलाई भनाउला
हो त साँच्ची डाक्टर साहबले भन्नुभएको थियो अस्ति हो त साँच्ची डाक्टर साहबले भन्नुभएको थियो अस्ति सुसूचित र सचेत पार्न आफ्नो गाईलाई भए लगाउनेलाई भन्दा दिदी नलाउनेलाई भए नडराई ढुक्कसँग खोप लाउनलाई गए सबैले सबैले मैलेलाई लाउनुहोस् खोप तपाईले सबैले मैलेलाई लाउनुहोस् खोप तपाईले सबैले मैलेलाई लाउनुहोस् खोप तपाईले
In the demo that you just heard, you could see that listeners engage with the host by singing Dohori. back and forth exchange of lyrical phrases crafted as questions and answers. In the demo, the host and listeners were discussing the importance of continuing COVID-safe behavior, like mask wearing, social distancing, even if you are fully vaccinated. If you listen to the song carefully, then you will realize that the message in the program, especially the to and fro between the host and the listeners, is pretty clear. That is, till the time everyone is vaccinated, no one is safe, and we cannot, afford to let our guards down. I've come to the second half of my presentation over here. So let me just talk about the impact of the show. In nearly 3 months of airing the radio program, we have received phone calls presenting anecdotal evidence of behavior level change. Right now, we like to call it behavior level action. In these phone calls, listeners demonstrate the desired behavior level change. They have shared that they have got vaccinated and also encouraging others in their family and communities to get vaccinated. Also, the show has been a very reliable source of diffusing critical life-saving messages to the community by the provincial government, as presented on the slide, the second anecdotal evidence. You can see that the commitment from the Chief Minister of the Karnali province, where he has mentioned that he's committed to get every citizen in Karnali vaccinated. And the interesting part was during this conversation, he was also very interested to follow up with the listeners who he had conversed in the program to check whether they had been vaccinated or not. So this kind of commitment coming from a politician, especially the chief minister, is great as well. Also, we have been witnessing a shift in social norms when it comes to women and their decision-making caliber, men and masculinity, all related to vaccine decision-making. In the anecdote that I've shared on the screen, we can see how women are encouraged to decide for themselves after listening to women like them, where they share their stories about how they got vaccinated for themselves and for the future of their family. Here you can see that how a rumor related to vaccines and how it made people important, engineered fear inside a young male listener, and how the radio show helps ease the fear inside him. From a social and behavioral change lens, what I keep on saying is when you celebrate community engagement or when you celebrate community accomplishments, they support you with localized diffusion of critical messages, which is very important. The number of phone calls that we received during these 3 months period, where they wanted to share with others that they have got vaccinated, proves this point. And here are some examples of people proudly sharing that they've got vaccinated and calling other people to get vaccinated as well.
मैले यो जगन्नाथमा आउने खेलो दोहोरी भन्ने कार्यक्रम सुनेपछि मलाई यो थप बुस्टर डोजहरू लाउनु पर्दो रहेछ अनि यो कोरोनाको जुन खोप आइरहेको छ यो चाहिँ सुरक्षित रहेछ भन्ने कुरा थाहा भयो।
मैले यो दोहोरी कार्यक्रम सुनेबाट हैन एकदम जानकारी पाएको छु हैन बुझेको छु जानेको छु। मैले दोस्रो खोप त लगाइसके तर पहिलो पनि लगाइसके र दोस्रो पनि लगाइसके। मलाई ज्वरो त आएको छैन हैन ठिकै भएको छ। म के भन्न चाहन्छु भनेपछि यदि तपाईँहरूले कोरोनाको अनि खोप लगाउनु भएको छैन भने नजिकै हैन स्वास्थ्यमा गएर अनि खोप लगाउनु होला।
खोप लगाउँदाखेरि मलाई त्यस्तो साइड इफेक्ट कुनै पनि खालको देखिएन। कोरोना विरुद्ध त्यो खोपले काम गरेको जस्तो मलाई अनुभूति भएको छ। जो जसले खोप लगाउन छुटाउनु भएको छ अथवा अहिलेसम्म खोप लगाउनु भएको छैन उहाँहरू सबैलाई खोप लगाउनु हुन हार्दिक अनुरोध गर्दछु।
Now, I've come to the end of my presentation, and let me just discuss some of the behavioral insights that we have garnered from the radio program in a period of 3 months. The first one being the need of social proof. What we have garnered from the radio program, and there is a larger pool of evidence that suggests that people who are really concerned about the efficacy of the vaccines or are, worried about the side effect of the available vaccines really want to see social proof. That means whether or not others in the community have been vaccinated or not. So we realized that listeners were more motivated to get vaccinated when they heard other people share their stories on the radio waves through Dohori, or when they heard a famous politician or a government official share that they got the jab and there was no side effect. Another thing that we keep on saying as social behavioral change practitioners is one thing we need to realize is how information is presented is critical to how people interpret it. What we did in the radio show is that we framed vaccination as not only as an action required for one's own health, but for the health of one's family. This message definitely helps nudge people to be vaccinated, as it was framed in a way that it was to do with responsibility, it was to do with the future of the family. So the framing of the message really matters. The power of public commitment works wonders. There is evidence that suggests that people are more likely to follow on a behavior if they commit publicly, especially if they see their role models do that. For example, when the chief minister of Karnali openly shared that he had been vaccinated and there was no side effect, that level of endorsement done publicly does help motivate people to get vaccinated. Guided by behavioral science and insights while scripting the radio show script, we have been focusing on the principle of loss aversion as narratives of people, what people might miss out if they do not get vaccinated, acts as a motivator for people to get vaccinated. For example, framing a message from a regret aversion lens and state that people may regret waiting to get vaccinated if they end up in the hospital. We are also aware, and this is a universal truth, that losses loom greater on people's mind than gains. So rather than framing vaccination in terms of benefit, consider framing vaccination in terms of what people could lose if they do not get vaccinated. Furthermore, what we have also realized during the production of the radio program is the use of culture and cultural tools such as Dohori songs, supports with heralding non-adversarial dialogues and discussion, and focuses on a more solution-oriented approach. This is something that I recently shared in one of my presentations, that if you had a regular radio program on debate and discussion on vaccine and COVID-19, I'm 100% sure that most of the questions would be angry shouting and the answers would be filled with irritation. But with the creative use of culture, people tend to be more respectful, empathetic, and solution oriented, which is definitely the touchstone for trust and collaboration when it comes to social and behavioral change. And lastly, entertainment approach shows that there is a power and potential to shift social norms by building agency and voice, especially of the most marginalized community. And this has been displayed and demonstrated on the radio program, with women engaging with us through songs and sharing on how they decided to take the jab after listening to other women, and the men letting go of their guard and realizing that their decision of not getting vaccinated affects their family and their future. If you're fascinated by these 6 behavioral insights, then let me also share a secret that all these insights that we've used in the development of Khelo Dohori, the SBC informed radio show, is being guided by Save the Children Nepal's Little Jab Book, the first of its kind behavioral insight driven jab book or playbook that talks about behavioral insights required to strengthen vaccine uptake in Nepal. Thank you so much for patiently listening to the presentation. And we at Save the Children Nepal really hope that we have inspired you to invest more on social and behavioral change programming, and of course utilize behavioral insights to design and monitor your projects. And we'll be happy to take on any conversation related to collaboration or we'll be happy to hear your thoughts on it as well. And if you have any questions, then please do feel free to ask. Thank you so much, and thanks. This was a great sharing. Thanks.
Thank you.